Lancelot is a 2018 novel by Giles, Kristian, and I have some thoughts. So there's an opening scene of a woman being tied to a stake to be burnt, while a crowd watches and a priest honks like a goose. Then we have a narration from Lancelot in the first person recalling his father, taking himself back to his boyhood in Benwick. His father is king, a bit rough but pushing, towards growth on young Lancelot, though his mother is doting on Lancelot as well. It's actually rather grim. It's very, you know, I guess this time period, last decade, last 15 years, even last 20 years in some sense of edgy, grim, darkness. So if you like that, then it'll probably immediately be interesting to you. I thought it was a little much, but really not bad. So Lancelot has a way with horses. He likes hoe, and he likes birds for hunting. So Kristian actually in his note, this is actually at the end of the book, but I read it before. That he said he wasn't really trying to be true to any source of the legend. He mostly just wrote a story about Lancelot, about love, loss, etc. He did say his first inspiration for the story was Cornwell's Warlord Chronicles, though, which is something I recently read and was really not a fan of. Much at all. It was okay, I think, generally speaking. So in a sense, this book starts as a coming of age. I'd say the first half of the book is that coming of age. That's definitely adult literature, for sure. I would not hand this to a teenager, really, a young teenager, at least. It starts heavily gruesome and dark, like I mentioned. Mellows out a little bit for a while. It's not a super happy tale, though. It's rather tragic, really. We do learn of Merlin, of his Saxon slave, Oswina, of Guinevere, of Lancelot's young friendship with Guinevere, as that is a key focus of this book, to try to explain this Lancelot and Guinevere adultery that really takes place in Arthurian legend. We also learn of things like Peleus and Nimue. It is much more personal than something like the Warlord Chronicles. You really get into Lancelot's life more than you ever get into like Dervahl's life, right? When we get to Arthur, though, about halfway through the book, much of the stuff that follows shortly after has Lancelot as the eyes of plot progression, but little actually happens to him or because of him. We just witness Arthur kind of through him. It helps us see that character of Arthur, but doesn't really give us any development of the protagonist. So while this halfway point brings us more in line with the Legend of Arthur, it loses the unique feeling that was really there at the start of the book. And that is until we meet a wife, a certain wife that comes in, of course, as well. And this book takes a very different approach to like Christianity than Cornwell. Cornwell's, I think, approach was really obnoxiously bad. Most of the characters are not Christians and don't speak well of Christians, but it isn't to the point of Cornwell, who obviously has something of disdain against the religion in his caricatures. Kristian does make better use of this. It's still really not historically accurate at all. He's also not trying to be, which is funny because it is historical fiction. But so instead of having some holy war, though, he makes the love of Guinevere and Lancelot, I don't know, kind of a focus on they're not Christian in a way. I don't know. It's not excused in the romances, right? But in Christian belief, I guess, obviously adultery would not be excused, and those later romances are all obviously Christian. So I'm not sure how the pagan particulars, and they're really not gone into here, but this and the love we see blossom early in the book makes this work better in some ways than the whole adultery does in, say, the romances, which I'm really not a fan of Lancelot at all, actually, in the romances, so I thought it was an interesting thing to go into this one. This is not like those medieval romances at all, but more like what people think of when they hear the word romance today, really. Kind of a tragic one, though, I should preface. And Arthur is compassionate himself as a character. He's less a shade and a sad excuse for a source of the legend like he is in Cornwell. Obviously, I read Cornwell very shortly before reading this. He isn't astounding either, though. His character does stand out. His character is a little bit better, but and he does sort of become a brother in arms to Lancelot. But like, it's more told than it ever is shown. That's actually one of the bigger problems with this book. We do eventually get Mordred in the story. He's a tad more insufferable than Merlin is in here. One thing that I think that has a double-edged effect in this book is the battles are not the focus, and I'm fine with that. I don't actually particularly care about a lot of battle scenes, especially as the first half of the book isn't really about battles anyways. Again, it's that coming-of-age aspect. Often Arthurian books get bogged down in endless battles. I've had that problem in, say, like Stephen R. Lawhead or even some of the medieval romances. And again, that's not a problem here because it's not the focus. Or at least not for me. I mean, maybe you want more battles. I don't know exactly what kind of reader you are. One this does do is give us very little of the brotherhood, though. Again, like I just mentioned, between Lancelot and Arthur. We're all familiar with Arthurian lit, probably. Otherwise, this would be a spoiler. We just see some scenes that build that relationship, but often we are just told it by Lancelot, actually. We don't really see anything. It doesn't really work then in this triangle as one of the points. Arthur is way less defined than Guinevere. And even more so compared to Lancelot, who is our main character, our narrator. So, I don't know. The story is just kind of laughable. The idea of like the tragic, how it ties to Christianity doesn't really make any sense. It's just kind of there's like a silly point to pin it on. There's this point where that turning to away from pagan beliefs is obviously something doomed to fail utterly. So, I don't know, maybe Kristian is a little bit of an edgy Reddit atheist, but again, I think the biggest problems with this book is the lack of brotherhood really doesn't make the ending work at all. You lose one thing for another, and it just doesn't work, right? So, and it's tragic, sure, but it's mostly infuriating, is what it is. It could have been much better, right? I understand tragedy, actually. I get the Arthurian. I mean, I'm a humanities major, literature guy. I mean, so bravo in some sense, right? The other bits don't work well enough to make the tragedy seem worth it, or even make sense. It just doesn't even make sense, right? That's the problem. That's why it doesn't feel worth it as a reader, because the tragedy makes no sense, actually, as far as like verisimilitude is concerned. So it feels like a choice, and a really stupid choice, not a sad fate, just a very sorry choice that Guinevere and Lancelot make, and it doesn't make any sense. So that's a failure, I think, on Kristian's part. I think he feels really bad on that, really stumbles in the later half of the book. And this, being a complete book, I really see no other reason to read any of the other books in this so-called series. So I want to say a few things. It did succeed in making me like Lancelot. That's new. Again, I mentioned before, I didn't really like him normally in the stories or in romances. And while the beginning had me very weary, the very beginning, the following hits for a good chunk of the book were fine. I really like the younger Lancelot and Guinevere stuff until they weren't fine, right? So I know some people complain about Guinevere. I don't have a big problem with it, really. I was worried I wouldn't like it when I started, and I feel like I should have followed my gut here, actually, and just not read it. While I'm okay with tragedies, again, I like tragedies. I like romances. I like romance-based tragedies. They often have too many loopholes sometimes, and this book has plenty, and they're very big ones. So it kind of made me rage. When I read the end of the book, I wasn't super sad and disappointed. I was really mad that Kristian decided to go that route, just to like try to make it. Actually, it's a similar problem I have with Romeo and Juliet, actually. As much as I like Shakespeare, that just doesn't work personally. Like, it's just a bit silly. A bit too contrived. And I think making Arthur uninteresting, kind of degrading into a pusillanimous loser was kind of silly, and left a sour taste in my mouth. There is a fun nod to Gandalf and the Eagles, but that's like, I don't know, that doesn't help the book that much. It's just a tiny Easter egg.